Hi, everyone. Welcome back for our third program for International Careers Week with the Montana World Affairs Council. Here we have a very special guest, Kit Heffner. I also want to take a moment and thank our sponsors, the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, the Humanities Montana, Clearwater Credit Union, and Stockman Bank. Kit Heffner, who is now a Bozeman resident, currently serves as a board director for several multinational companies while also actively supporting Montana's small business startup community. He spent the majority of his career working in Southeast Asia and Africa. But by far, his favorite role is being the Montana World Affairs Council board president. Over to you, Kit.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Um, I was trying to think about how to start talking about international business. Maybe I'll start with a couple thoughts. Um, First of all, we've got the Super Bowl coming up this weekend, and when you're watching the Super Bowl, which team is doing better? The team that's at its own goal line fighting defense, or the team that's actually deep in the other side's territory, uh, trying to get the ball across the line for a touchdown? In my view, it's the team deep in the other side's territory going for the touchdown. And when I think about international business, that's a lot about what we're doing. Um, we could sit here in the US and play defense, or we could take American products overseas and play offense. That's one thought. Another thought, um, there are lots of beautiful places in the world, and we probably think it would be great to take some vacations over there, beautiful exotic places. Suppose someone said, hey, you don't have to pay thousands of dollars to go to those places. I'm actually going to pay you and pay you pretty well to go and live in those countries. Again, that's international business. Or maybe think about it another way. I think we all want to make a difference in the world. And where can you do that? Well, if you want to improve economic prosperity, if you're worried about the climate, a lot of big changes can be made overseas. And why not actually go out there and do it? So just a couple thoughts about international business. For myself, where did I start? Maybe it all started with my family. I grew up overseas. My father, who growing up had never had a passport, had never been in a plane, he joined the military and was sent to Vietnam. And he liked being overseas so much, he decided he wanted to do business, and brought me, when I was 4 years old, out to live with him and my family overseas doing business. So that's probably where the bug got into me. I came back to the United States for college and also graduate school. A key pivoting point for me was doing an exchange program in Thailand. I thought maybe I'd like to go back overseas, but doing the exchange program really crystallized it for me. So coming out of business school, I absolutely wanted to join a company that would do business overseas, preferably in Southeast Asia. And I did a lot of searching. There are lots of good American companies doing business overseas. I found a subsidiary of Chevron. It's called Caltex, and they only did business in Asia and Africa. And so I said, well, this is the company for me. And so that's where I started. When you're just starting out in business, I definitely needed the will to go overseas, but you also need to have some skill. And my skill, where I started out, was on the finance side. I had a master's in finance, and so I started with Chevron on the finance side and worked my way up. I wanted to get into the general management. I actually wanted to lead a company, and start coming right out of school, lots of people would like to start out being CEO, but again, you need to take some time. So I worked on the finance side, but there was an opportunity came up in Cambodia, a small country that was just opening up to the world. It's also pretty dangerous at the time. And Chevron was looking for somebody who wanted to go into Cambodia. And a lot of people actually had concerns about it from a safety perspective. I was a young, ambitious person and thought, here's my chance. And basically that was what got me from, I'd say from a skills position to actually getting to lead a company. So I got to lead Chevron starting up in Cambodia, which worked very well. It was a good stage to show the company what I could do. And that really launched my career with Chevron. I had a terrific career working in Thailand, Hong Kong, Africa with Chevron. I'd say really launched with Cambodia. So after about 20 years with Chevron, um, things were going well, but as you go up in a company, a lot of times they want you to go back to head office in the US. I wanted to stay overseas. And a country called Myanmar, it's a small Southeast Asian country, not too small, 60 million people, was opening up to the world. Chevron at the time was not ready to go into Myanmar. They thought it'd be too difficult. So I decided it was time to leave Chevron, which was a big step, have a successful 20-year career, and do a startup with a friend of mine that I met from the Cambodia days. And so the two of us went into Myanmar, company just reopening to the world. And the way we went in was we spoke to Ford and told them, look, we have experience doing business in Southeast Asia, in frontier markets. We've been successful. Let us, with our company, represent you, Ford, in Myanmar. And Ford said, well, yes, Myanmar looks like a very difficult place to do business. We're not sure we know how to do that. Go for it. You can be us in Myanmar. And that meant opening up showrooms, doing all the imports. On TV, if you see an ad for Ford, we're the ones doing it. We were everything for Ford in Myanmar. We are everything for Ford in Myanmar. We also went to John Deere with the same proposition. And John Deere also said, yeah, okay, go for it. You can be us in Myanmar. It was an amazing time. Doing a startup is very different than working for a giant company like Chevron. When you're with a huge company like Chevron, you can pick up the phone and call the best lawyers in the world. You can pick up a phone and call any banker in the world, and they're probably willing to lend to you. When you're on your own, you call up the phone and it's all quiet. It's just you trying to figure out how to do it. But it was a fantastic experience. We now have more than 3,000 employees in Myanmar. Ford is the #1 automotive brand in Myanmar, which Ford can't say in very many countries around the world. So we're very proud of that. And all worked well. Well enough that I was actually able to take a step back from actually operating businesses and move here to Montana, where I'm happy to be able to work with the Montana World Affairs Council, helping startups here. I also teach at MSU. So maybe with that, I'll stop and turn things over to you with questions.
Everyone, if you can type in your questions, I will read them to Kit. But to start off, Kit, I'm curious, what would you say was your most memorable experience or project where understanding the international business landscape was critical to success?
I would say going into Myanmar. we were a small company. We needed partners in Myanmar to be able to do what we wanted to do. And an extremely important skill set to do business overseas is to be able to build relationships and to find partners you could trust. We went in there, one set of partners, I literally had a piece of paper with a phone number of a person. And I was walking down the street, finally found them, but walked into their office. It turns out some of them, they were Burmese, but they had gone to the same international school I had gone to, and it just started a whole dialogue. But going in there, as an American, Americans do a lot of things very well. But I didn't walk in there and tell them, oh, I'm from the US, I know how to do everything. It was more like, oh, I'm from the US and I need help doing business in your country. And how can we work together? And it's, I think, listening skills, building relationships, not jumping in and saying you know how to do everything, but actually trying to understand how to do business in their country. That was the start of a fantastic relationship. And so that was 2012, and we're still partners now. A lot of mutual respect for each other. Hey, we brought, what did we bring to the table? We did bring some good ideas from overseas. We did bring partnerships with companies like Ford, but they were the ones that really helped us understand how to do things on the ground in Myanmar. And I think that was a recipe for success.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak two. I speak Thai and I speak Spanish. Language is not my strength. I think my strength is more on the cultural side. Before I go into a country, I spend a lot of time trying to understand cultural norms. I never try to pretend that I'm from there. They would know that I'm not. If you want to be authentic, I think you should just be yourself, but respect their culture and really understand it. That said, a lot of friends of mine, successful internationally, their start was on the linguistic side. If you can be good at a language, that is a huge advantage. And it's not necessarily the language of the country where you're going. Just learning a language, that skill set is incredibly important, both from being able to learn whatever language the country you're going to go to. I learned Thai after I was sent to Thailand. But also learning a language gives you a cultural sensitivity and appreciation, which is extremely important. Learning language also, it proves you're serious. If you want to have an international career, you need to prove you're serious. And whether that's, I did an exchange program, learning a language, actually going to the country, very helpful. So yeah, I'm not a huge linguist. I only speak two, but it's a huge advantage if you're thinking about an international business career.
How long did it take you to learn Thai?
Oh, again, I said I'm not a linguist. It took me years. And that actually might have been helpful. My team saw how hard I was trying, maybe with limited success, and they really appreciated that. So they liked that I was trying, and it helped that I could, by the time I finished my career in Thailand with my teams, they could have a meeting in Thai and I could listen in. I never got myself to the point where I could actually jump in Thai, but I could listen in and we could have good meetings. I could read advertising copy in Thai. We had a joke, if the advertising copy was too hard for me to read it, it was probably too complicated. I think they just they appreciated that I was trying. So it took me years to learn.
Do you still do businesses overseas?
I still do. I'm still a director of the companies that I started in Myanmar, also the director of some companies in Cambodia, another country that I really love. Um, yes, so I love to be able to still uh, keep tabs on what's going on out there and make sure the companies continue to do well. Probably my biggest help is on the partnership side. Those old relationships. Um, it's not easy to do business in a partnership, and I can help keep those relationships strong.
Can you give an example of cultural differences in business and how your willingness to listen and learn helped the situation?
That's a big cultural difference. This will be, as an American, going just about anywhere. Um, Americans are um, we're quite loud. we, we speak our minds. These are all positive traits. Um, Southeast Asia in particular, they tend to be quite quiet uh, and very hierarchical. So whoever's the boss, they'll tend to defer to. Um, a lot of Americans who went to do business in Southeast Asia really struggle because they find they can't get any ideas out of their team. And of course, if you've been sent there, you probably have some skills, but you must get ideas from your team. They know the market better than you do. So how do you bust through that cultural difference? You almost have to go, you have to bust out of your own cultural, Americans, we want to talk. You just have to, nope, you're just going to sit there and listen. And you might have some quiet periods where nobody's talking. But you just have to wait and wait for everyone to start feeling comfortable with you. And then they'll start talking. And when they do start talking, you have to make sure you listen and sincerely listen. And before you know it, your team will give you the ideas. They'll give you the things you need to know about that local market to succeed. But yeah, I think a big cultural difference is Americans, we tend to talk more and we need to learn to listen and prove it to the people we're there with. Sometimes it just means, put a poker face on and just quietly sit there smiling and wait for other people to start talking. Actually, in negotiations, Asians, they kind of have fun with Americans because they know that Americans can't sit still and keep quiet. So in a negotiation, often Asians will just sit there quietly and wait for Americans to essentially give away everything um, because they just can't help themselves. They can't handle the quiet. So it works both ways.
I don't know if I could do business in Asia there, Kit. Can you share some key aspects of working in international business and how it differs from domestic business operations?
I think in the United States, we have a lot of the infrastructure in place. We have a legal system that works not perfectly, but pretty well. We have transportation systems that work pretty well. In the United States, I think you can be a super specialist because a lot of other things work already. To work internationally, you tend to have to be more of a generalist. When I went into Myanmar, literally we couldn't get phones to work. We had to lay internet cable to our office just to get connectivity. You can't rely on the legal system at all. Usually overseas, if you go to court, you've already lost. You need to work you need to develop good relationships. That's the way to succeed. You need and be able to do lots of things. You need to figure out, how do you import a Ford pickup truck into Myanmar? It's not that easy. Some of those pathways we had to develop ourselves before we could even start doing business. So you need to be much more of a generalist and really rely much more on relationships um, rather than being able to rely on the rule of law. That if you're in court overseas, you've already lost. Yeah.
How do cultural differences impact business negotiations and relationships in the international context? And how do professionals navigate these challenges?
I gave you the one example of the trick
Gotta be
Asians
quiet.
do. Yes, they stay quiet while we give away all our cards. I think also I cannot emphasize relationship enough. A lot of places overseas, you can't really do business until actually you've become friends with people. Um, Taking the time to go out to a dinner, um, to and this might take years. So I think that relationship side is a key one. And again, start building that as soon as you can. If you want to just go in and very quickly be able to do a deal, you're probably going to run into trouble. You need to take the time. Um, and what that means is the your 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 personal skills, the persona that you want to deliver, becomes more important. Um, the others, people need to be able to trust you. Um, you need to develop a reputation as someone that they can trust, a reputation of integrity, someone they want to do business with. Um, Actually, a lot of the values we have here in Montana, are you a good neighbor? Um, and those types of just being a good person, being a good partner, will pay off tremendously overseas, maybe even more than it would here in the United States.
For students interested in international business, what educational paths and experiences would you recommend to prepare for a career in this field?
Yep. We talked about learning a language is always a great start. Anytime you have a chance to do an exchange program, also a great start. Um, but business, I mentioned, what was my skill when I first started, and that was in finance. But there are lots of different skills. Agriculture, U.S. has some of the most sophisticated agriculture in the world. We're pretty darn good here in Montana. Those are some skills that are needed everywhere. So it could be on the ag side. On the tech side, again, here in Montana, we do photonics. If you can be strong in a tech field, that could be your ticket to get a seat at the table. So language, cultural skills, but also be good at something and anything just to give yourself a seat at the table, because folks overseas know how to do a lot of things. So how are you going to add value? There are lots of different ways, but be good at something. And also, you can get your start in different ways. I mentioned my father got his start in the military. That's a great way to get international experience. Peace Corps, working for the State Department. You don't have to start in business to start a business career overseas.
You've talked about language a lot. Are there any specific languages or regions that are particularly valuable for individuals pursuing a career in international business? And how important is cultural fluency in the business world?
I had to pick some key languages. Spanish is a darn good one. The entire continent of Latin America. It'll help you out. And you might say, wait a minute, kid, in Brazil, they speak Portuguese. But again, if you've learned Spanish, you can make a jump to Portuguese. Spanish would be an excellent one. Chinese is a pretty good one. Chinese are powerful competitors. And whether you want to actually do business in China itself, or lots of other places doing business with Chinese companies, that could be a good one. But any language would be a big help. Sometimes if you learn a relatively obscure language, if you learn Czech, you're going to be pretty special for any American business that wants to do business in the Czech Republic, or Czechia as it's now called. So they're the major languages or more obscure ones. Either way, it's a good thing.
How do international business professionals stay informed about changes in global markets and adapt their strategies to new economic and political landscapes?
Yeah, I was a big believer in using lots of different sources to have my information and to stay up to date. Certainly the media, speaking to other business people. I was part of the start of the Myanmar Business Council, International Business Council. So speak to my colleagues in other companies. All those good local partners and local friendships, they give you insights that you would never get from just looking from the outside. Also, actually, I always made sure I was good friends with the U.S. Embassy. The United States government has very good information on local countries, and usually have quite a few highly skilled people there on the ground that can help you. So, as an American, I've mentioned it's nice to be able to listen. Don't speak too loud. I think Teddy Roosevelt had a great quote, speak softly and carry a big stick. It's nice to be a listener and not to be too loud, and also know you have the American government behind you. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I'm curious. Could you go into some of the companies that you have? How did you get into some of them that are different than what you've already talked about?
So, okay, we mentioned Chevron, we mentioned Ford, we mentioned John Deere. We've also gone into the hotel business. We've gone into we have a chain of pizza restaurants in Myanmar. You might say, wow, that's a big jump from oil or cars. But myself and my partners, we actually developed an expertise in doing business in frontier markets. And with that expertise, we've been comfortable to go into these other businesses. And they've also proven quite successful.
Would you say pizza is the most different company you've started?
Certainly one of the most fun. But yeah, it's also been fun. In Myanmar, people don't eat pizza. So how do you introduce something like that in a new market? It's funny. It actually started out very much as a family thing. Bring your whole family together. It's a very affordable way to feed your family. Everyone in the family gets a slice. It also became a very trendy thing for date night. If you really wanted to impress your boyfriend or girlfriend, you would go to the pizza restaurant. That very international. So it's a lot of fun working in different cultures and trying to introduce some things that are kind of American.
A really important question has just been asked. What style of pizza?
You do have to adjust for foreign tastes. Um, in Southeast Asia, they just they like to put sauce on everything. Yeah, anyone's gone to a Thai restaurant, there's good dipping sauces. Um, so for pizza, they like pizza and they put ketchup on pizza and mayonnaise on pizza. Um, and it's not my favorite kind of pizza, but they want to put sauce on it, and so we'll adjust for their tastes. Um, yeah.
That is great. So what is your favorite type of pizza that you've now had in Asia? Mayo?
I'm not a big fan of the mayo, but we do some great things with shrimp um, in Southeast Asia on pizza. Uh, it's surprisingly good. Um, yeah, pizza with lots of shrimp on it. I think that's been my favorite international one.
Bringing it back to international business and away from pizza, can you share a memorable experience or project where understanding the international business landscape was really critical?
Um, boy, see if I can come up with a different example. Um, yeah, so going into Cambodia, um, one of the things that's nice with international business, you can go to different countries, and different countries are in different places in their development cycle. So if you've seen business in Thailand, you might have an idea about how business might move in Cambodia, but with like a 10-year advance. It's almost like you have a crystal ball. That said, you really need to understand what are the issues locally. Um, one thing we found locally, so Cambodia, this was the late 1990s, had been coming out of a long civil war. Um, a lot of people had lost their legs with landmines. Um, we had full service gas stations, and we had some people with only one leg, so they had a artificial limb, come and wanted to be pump attendants. Now, the first thing you might think, geez, you have to, there are cars are going all over the place, you have to move around. Maybe that's not the best place for a handicapped person. But we decided to give it a try. And as it turned out, they were some of our best employees. So here we are helping people who really had a need, but they appreciated that so much. They were incredibly loyal. They gave fantastic service. The customers coming in thought, wow, that's fantastic. Here's this international company coming in here, helping real local issues. Um, another thing we did in Cambodia, um, people didn't trust product quality and they didn't trust product quantity. Um, you would go to a gas station and you thought you're buying a gallon and they really only give you half a gallon. And you don't see it very often. So a lot of people came away tricked. We went out of our way to have super modern uh, pumps that everyone felt that they could really trust. And a lot of our competitors didn't see why we were having these fancy, super precise, super high quality pumps at our stations. But our customers recognized that and they trusted us and would rather come to us versus the competition. So you really had to understand what the local customers wanted and maybe be creative in who you were hiring as well.
It sounds like international law might be important to starting a business overseas. Have you become an expert or do you rely on lawyers to help navigate the landscape?
Um, yes.
Yes, to which one?
Particularly if you're doing a startup, you can't rely on lawyers for everything because they're too expensive. But you certainly need their help. So yes, you must understand the international legal framework and be able to set up your company so you aren't violating any local laws. But I think you also need to develop an appreciation for where maybe you can't just rely on the law, particularly with your competitors. And so you can't be naive and just look at the letter of the law. You really need to understand how it's practiced in that country. And that's where lawyers can help you, but you really need to develop an understanding for yourself about how things really work, where the lawyers can tell you what it says in the book, but you need to understand what's actually happening.
Good advice. Did you ever feel unsafe running your businesses overseas?
Yes. um, that was a big challenge when we first went to Cambodia. There was guns on the streets. It was not unusual to have a business meeting where someone would bring out their gun and put it on the table. And you had to think about how you wanted to deal with that. Clearly, I mentioned before, it helps to have the U.S. government behind you. I made sure that I was good friends with the U.S. government and knew somebody to call if I got into trouble. I also was good friends with the local government. We were Chevron coming in to do business in a great way. Again, people could, their cars weren't breaking down because of bad fuel. The prime minister was thrilled to have Chevron in the country. We weren't spilling fuel in their rivers. We were doing a good job. So I made sure I had some powerful friends. Some of my counterparts at other companies took the approach of having bodyguards and lots of, if other people have guns, we're going to have guns too. I took a more low-key approach. I didn't drive a fancy car. That would have made me a target. I took a low-key approach without bodyguards. Some of my colleagues ended up getting kidnapped by their own bodyguards. If you think about it, you're there, you're representing an international business, you've got money, and the bodyguards are there with guns. Sometimes the bodyguard said, wait a minute, why don't just kidnap this guy and then turn the tables? So yes, sometimes I felt unsafe. You do your best to take precautions, learn the lay of the land as best you can, but you can't totally avoid risk. And by the way, your team is watching you. If when there's a risk, you immediately leave the country, your team's not going to respect you. The captain can't leave the ship. The person who replaced me in Cambodia, I tried to coach him about that. But there was a situation where he felt unsafe and he immediately got on a plane and went back to his home, which was in Malaysia. And he never recovered with his team. So it can be unsafe, but you do your best to mitigate the risks. And yeah, don't run at the first sign of trouble because your team won't respect that.
My last question for you, Kent, is what advice do you have for students who aspire to work in international business, and what steps can they take to gain a competitive edge in the global marketplace?
Well, first of all, I'd say where I started, go for it. It's more fun to play offense than it is to play defense. We've got fantastic companies and products. Ford pickups, I think, they're fantastic. John Deere tractors are fantastic. it's shocking, some of the Montana companies that do well overseas. Um, you may have heard of Sun Mountain golf bags made right here in Montana. They're #1 in Thailand right now. All sorts of things. Our photonics lead the world. So go for it. #1. Um, Learn a language. Uh, do an exchange program, both to prove to others that you're serious about being overseas, and maybe to double check for yourself. It's not for everybody. Uh, um, and get good at something. Pick something. Again, it could be finance, could be tech, could be ag, but be good at something so that you can add value when you go overseas.
All right, well, thank you so much, Kit. I just want to take a time to say thank you again to our sponsors at Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Clearwater Credit Union, Stockman Bank, and Humanities Montana. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Glad to be here.